My name is Paul Pettigrew, and currently I'm in the architecture department. Well, I'm not actually in the architecture department, but I work in the architecture department of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. And I have a funny title. I'm the director of undergraduate outreach and alumni outreach. And I'm also involved in career development. And I both teach in the classroom, but my primary function is really finding more young people like yourselves that might have an interest in studying architecture or design at MIT. And so that's pretty much how I spend the majority of my time is working out ways to sort of find you all. In terms of my background, I'm from the city of Chicago in the state of Illinois, and I studied architecture at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana as an undergraduate, which is a 4-year architecture program. And I sort of followed in the footsteps of my father, who also studied at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. He studied urban planning, which is pretty close to architecture, but I preferred buildings to cities in terms of scale. When I finished up there, I don't know if anyone knows that area of the country, but it's all cornfields. So I decided I wanted to go to grad school where there was a city rather than more corn. So I ended up at the MIT for my master's degree in architecture. And then when I finished up, I came back to Chicago and I worked as an architect in Chicago. I'm a licensed architect. But then I also kind of segued out of architecture for a while and took a job with a company called Crate and Barrel, which is a home furnishings company, and worked in their stores, ended up working in their architecture department, designed stores, designed product, designed store fixtures, etc. Did that for many years. And then I began teaching at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago, architecture, taught for 16 years, classes in architecture and then also in product design. And then MIT found me there and brought me back to MIT about 6 years ago to help them with this project of finding more young people who wanted to study architecture. So, I mean, in terms of my background, just so you can see it, like literally my background, that's not fake. It's like one of the cool things about becoming an architect or a product designer, or somebody who can actually make things, is you can like fill your whole apartment with things that you designed and made. So like the bookshelves behind me, I designed and made. The little TV cart over there, I designed and made that. That coffee table, designed and made that. The dining room table, I designed and made that. Just about everything in my house, I've designed and made. And it's one of those sort of things you get to do when you have the skills that I have, and also sort of the interest in doing that sort of thing. So
it's a lot of innovation there. And for those of you who haven't been to University of Illinois Champaign, beautiful campus there. So do you mind if we just jump right into the student questions?
Anything you want to ask, feel free.
We have a question from Mev. She's a high school student in Italy, and she is super interested in architecture. Mev, go ahead and let us know your question.
Hi, sir. Really nice to meet you. Hello.
Hello.
I'm majoring in architecture in high school, and I wanted to know from you how you choose and what you expect from undergraduates to be part of MIT of Architecture. Do you have specific canons regarding personal skills as well as tests or requirements and certifications? I mean, hard skills and soft skills, which one do you think is most important? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start by answering your question this way. So MIT is somewhat unique as a college or a university in the sense that when you apply to MIT, you don't apply to any particular major, you just apply. And so I think this past year, because of COVID, somewhere in excess of 30,000 students applied, and about 1,300 students were admitted. And students have until the end of their first year to declare a major. So the majority of the students who end up in architecture or design at MIT are in architecture or design because they both think of themselves as creative, but also maybe strong, or that they have an interest in math and science as well. Certainly, if you come to MIT, you have an interest in math or science. Otherwise, you probably aren't going to get in. But often students are looking for a way to sort of take those math and science skills and apply them in a creative way that can essentially change the way that people experience the world, right? Inside of buildings or by way of the products that they work with. So like in terms of skills, like MIT is cool because we just want to know like what makes you unique and special. So if you're like amazing at something, you need to tell us about that and show us that. MIT doesn't require portfolios, but we accept them, and we accept maker portfolios, art and architecture portfolios, performing arts portfolios, research portfolios, and did I get them all? I think I got them all. Yeah. So a real variety of student types apply to MIT. And if I can ask you, where in Italy are you from? What town?
I'm near Venice.
Ah, okay. So, I have two cousins who are architects in Rome. One is no longer practicing as an architect, but she designs jewelry. So, and of course, I've traveled all over Italy, seeing my favorite architects there. Nice to meet you. Did I answer your question?
I think, yeah, you did. You did. I'm sure you get a lot of inspiration from different different places and different people and different time periods. We have a 4th grade class here in Nevada, and they want to know, which design or creation would you say is your proudest work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one of the coolest things about being an architect and designing buildings is when you actually get to be in them. A lot of the projects I've designed are for families, right? So once I've designed a house, I'm not really going to be in that house. The family's going to be in the house. They might invite me over every once in a while, but it's really their house. Probably the one that's the most important to me is here in Chicago. I worked for many years on the new international terminal at O'Hare Airport. So anytime now when I'm flying in or out of Chicago internationally, I get to sort of encounter the building that I designed. And it's really cool because I built all of the physical models of that building, like about 7 years before it ever got built. I built it in a model form, and I drew it in perspective drawings. And then I did all of the drawings, or many of the drawings that ended up being the drawings used by the contractor to build the building. And so now I get to go into it, and it's really cool. And that happens with a number of projects, especially the ones for like Crate and Barrel that I did. I helped start another company called CB2 while I was there. And so I've been able to walk into and through the buildings that I've designed, and there's nothing better than that, for sure.
And I've flown into O'Hare quite a few times. Beautiful, beautiful work. So we have a question from one of the students in France, and they would like to know, were you always artistic or creative, or was it something that developed?
Definitely. I think because I had a father who was an urban planner, and he started in architecture for 1 year before switching to urban planning. I saw him drawing all the time. And I also, my Italian grandfather, back to the Italy thing, who came from Italy, used to do these crazy, amazing Christmas decorations each year. Chicago used to have competitions for the best decorated house, and my grandfather won trophies for best decorated house. And so I would work with him, through the whole year to design and then build these Christmas decorations. And I know that sounds like a funny thing, that you would say, well, Christmas decorations become architecture or buildings, but it's those sorts of experiences. I mean, I was drawing all the time, but more importantly, probably I was making things all the time. I wrestled in high school and in grade school. So I built all of my own weightlifting equipment, and we're talking machines, not just barbells, but like pulleys and machines that allowed me to work out in my basement. You name it. I built all of my own bedroom furniture. I built stereos. So I think anything, creative, of course, becomes, the type of thing that you then look to do something with when you get to college, right? Like in high school, you can mess around in art classes and maybe after school type activities, but then college, all of a sudden you're being asked to like commit to something at the professional level, or at least at the academic level. And that's where you end. When I looked around, the only thing that looked like what I wanted to do or be was architecture. But the funny story there is, had I known something called product design or industrial design existed, I might have gone into that, because I really enjoy things smaller than buildings as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And would you say that, because it sounds like you're almost like an inventor in a way, where you see problems or see how something could be better if you come in and intervene. Is that kind of like how it is with architecture?
Yeah, like I teach. So one of the first essays I have all of my students read in one of my classes, it was written by uh just blanked on his name, but it'll come to me. But he wrote an article called "The Tweaker," and it was about Steve Jobs, who was the founder of Apple Computer. And by the term tweaker, he said that's somebody who takes something that already exists and just makes it better. So Apple didn't invent the MP3 player, but they did invent the iPod, and all of a sudden everybody was listening to music digitally. And they didn't invent the phone, the portable phone, but they did invent the iPhone, which really changed the way that we interacted with our phone. And so there are inventors, right? People who just come up with things that have never been thought of before. They usually die poor and unknown, but the tweakers are the ones that people remember, and often they die rich, if that's a goal in your life. So I think of myself as definitely an inventor because I'm not rich and nobody knows who I am. But I really enjoy that idea of just sort of, identifying something that I need or want and then designing it and making it. It's like the coolest experience you could imagine.
That's great stuff. And we know who you are. So, how much more people do you need?
Yeah.
So we have a question for one of our students in France, and she has a really, really good question. Bianca, you are unmuted and you should be able to ask.
I took a look at your website, and there is a lot of freestanding furniture. You mentioned Steve Jobs and all that, the iCharlie thing you did.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know if it's part of the architectural curriculum or more part of project of designing projects.
Yeah, it's a great question. And by the way, I think that's 2 students now from France. So one of my years of architectural study at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana actually took place in Versailles, France. So I was lucky enough to live in Versailles for a year, and our studios were in the horses' stables across from the chateau. Of course, no more horses anymore since Louis XIV. But anyway, it was really an amazing experience of learning in France. But we also traveled quite a bit through Europe. So here's an interesting thing, and I think it's because of my 2 Italian architect cousins. Because I met my one architect cousin pretty early on, I knew how he was being educated in Italy. And in Italy, because there wasn't a lot of new construction, new architecture, because there's enough old stuff to keep everybody busy just repairing it, kind of like Paris at least, or probably other parts of France. Architects there are not trained to be just designers of buildings. They're taught to basically design everything from a pencil to a city, or a spoon to a city is a famous quote. And so I kind of like that idea, that I could do something similar, because the class I teach at MIT, which is like the introductory design class for anybody who wants to design or become an architect at MIT, will go through this class, and we teach them the design process. And the design process can be applied to anything, really. And the design process is relatively easy. You've probably already done this in your lives, and it's basically identifying a problem, right? Somebody says, I need this, or I want this, or this is broken, or this doesn't work. And then the first thing is, well, let me think up some ways that I can improve upon that, or I can get you that thing that you want, or I can get it to do the thing you're asking it to do. And you come up with lots of different ideas, right? And then you look at all of those ideas, or maybe you and your friends, or you and your client, or whoever, look at these ideas, and you select the 1 or 2 that seem like the best idea. And then you develop those ideas a bit further. Finally, you prototype your idea, right? You actually make it to see if it actually works the way you thought it would work. And then if it's a good solution, you look into the possibility of actually having maybe other people make it for you, either in larger quantities or in a more sophisticated way, because often prototypes are just experiments. So most of what you've seen on my website, and thank you for going and looking, that was like, you're already a very good student, that you would go and like study up on like this guy to see, is this Paul Pettigrew guy even worth listening to? But I think most of what you see on there, especially in that category, I call them objects. these are like experiments. These are me just kind of testing out ideas that often I take and I apply them to architecture. Like the I Charnley that you saw, that little stereo, was actually designed and made for a house in Chicago that was designed by the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. And so my students and we all made furniture projects and put them into this house because it had no furniture. And so it was our way of testing out our ideas to see if they could kind of operate at the scale of architecture. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is like if you, it takes like many years to design and build a building, right? From start to finish. Even a little house might take 3 years. An airport, 15 years, right? And so, but I can design and make a picture frame in a day, you know? And so there's something really fun or exciting about those smaller projects that allow you to test out your ideas in a very quick way.
Absolutely, and we'll share out on the recording. We'll embed the link to paulpettigrewarchitect.com when we're done with the footage. And so before we let you go, we really thank you so much for spending the time with us today. It meant a lot. I know there's a number of kids who are interested in architecture and art. What kind of advice would you have for these students as they go out in the world and figure out what they want to do, as somebody who's obviously very accomplished in his field?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I'll give you the version of what I'm dealing with currently at MIT. And I mentioned this to Ralph when I met him, you know, just before we got started. I said, you know, at MIT, the most popular major right now is computer science. And it's by far the most popular major. And so very few students want to study architecture. And so, but that doesn't mean that these students don't like architecture or that they're not intrigued by architecture. I think there's a certain type of peer pressure that happens at MIT where students will start off thinking they're going to do something creative or something that's more of a passion for them, something they really believe in. But then they start to get feedback from their classmates, their dorm mates, and those classmates and dorm mates tell them, well, if you don't do computer science or if you don't do mechanical engineering, you won't be able to get a job, you'll be poor, and you'll be unhappy. And so a lot of the students will just sort of put away all of their creative abilities rather than finding a way to incorporate those creative abilities into what they do. And so I used to joke that, you know, if you go to a party and you tell people you're a lawyer or an accountant, right? They might think that's somewhat interesting. And maybe some of your parents are lawyers and accountants, so don't tell them I said this. But when I would go to parties and say I'm an architect, like all of a sudden a crowd of people will gather around me and say, really, have you designed anything I've ever seen or anything I've ever experienced? And then when I worked for Crate and Barrel, because at that time it was a really popular furniture company in the United States, I even had bigger crowds because people were like, wait, you're an architect and you design and work for Crate and Barrel. What's that like? And so I was way more fascinating than the lawyers and doctors and accountants. Even though they made more money than me, I was way more popular and interesting. And most architects are like, we just, so yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly happy. I definitely have friends who've made more money than me, but I'm probably one of the happiest people out there because I get to do the thing that I really love and have loved since I was like a little kid, basically. Yeah.